and Prison Reform. Thank you for joining us to talk about Second Look legislation. This is a real important law that would do a lot to move Virginia forward. Second Look would let judges review the long sentences that people who are incarcerated have been given. It would empower everyone in the criminal legal justice system, including victims of crime. It would not just save money, but generate money, improve public safety, and reunite families. But you don't have to take it from me. We'll hear from several speakers today, lawmakers who are sponsoring the bill, a member of the correctional community who supports it, and two people directly impacted by the criminal legal system. One, a victim of crime, and one, someone convicted of it. Our first speaker is the sponsor of the Second Look bill. Senator Creed Deeds is one of the most productive people in the Virginia Senate, as well as a senior member of the Senate majority. So he's going to tell us why this is the year that Second Look will become law. Senator Creed Deeds.
I was one of the most productive. I'm just one of the survivors. Our correctional system is supposed to be exactly that, correction. It's supposed to be about rehabilitation. There's just no point in imprisoning people who aren't a danger to themselves or others for longer than necessary. And all of this legislation does, I picked up the ball from the last senator to do it. And I think this is the year it passes because it passed the Senate last year. It passed the Senate last year, and I think it has a chance in the House of Delegates this year. I think we've got good bipartisan support for the legislation, and I think it has a chance to go forward. Yeah, I can talk. I can give you a lot of platitudes, but you already know why this legislation is important. People that aren't a danger of themselves, that have already done the time, deserve a chance to live the rest of their lives the best life they can. You know, I've spent a long time here, and I've been in a lot of prisons and jails. I'm a lawyer. I represent a lot of people that get in trouble, and I'm the kind of lawyer that represents people that are charged sometimes with really bad offenses. But every person is entitled to dignity. And every person, even if they make mistakes, they're entitled to a second chance. This legislation simply allows a person who has done their time, a person who has done at least 15 years. 15 years is a long time. Yeah. And anybody that knows kids, anybody that has kids knows that 15 years can go by pretty quick. But sometimes it can go by pretty slow. When you're missing some family member, it can go by pretty slow. 15 years to go back to court and ask the system to examine what they've done in prison, examine whether they're entitled to a second chance. And there can be a lot of conditions on release. There can be, this is not an automatic ticket to freedom. This is a chance. And that's all we're asking that the General Assembly consider, the General Assembly and the Governor consider giving people a second chance, to return to some form of normalcy. And you know, the one thing we don't always think about are the other victims. Honestly, there are victims of crime, and we've got to consider them. But the other victims, I'm talking about family, children, mothers, fathers, husbands, wives, children that are left at home while their loved ones incarcerated. We're talking about giving those people a second chance too. And this legislation is something that can give people hope. But we've discovered, in the years since we abolished parole, we've discovered that from a lot of correctional officers, that there are people in prisons that just don't have an incentive all the time to behave, don't have an incentive to follow the rules. This will give them that incentive. That's all. That's simply what this is about. Thank you for being here. And I'm sure there are other people that are going to talk.
Thank you, Senator Deeds. And for the reporters in here, just make sure that you write that this is an opportunity and not a get-out-of-jail-free card, okay? Next, we'll hear from Donald Baylor, who is Director of Organizing at the National Coalition of Public Safety Officers. A Second Look law would improve public safety in Virginia, and Mr. Baylor is here to speak on behalf of correctional officers about why they support Second Look.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. Good morning. I'll speak on this issue from
basically a labor perspective. I spent 27 years myself working in the department. And I represent employees who work in both the Department of Corrections and Juvenile Justice at this time. And I was around way back in the day when truth in sentencing came along. I've never been a proponent or believer in locking them up and throwing away the key. It doesn't make sense. And it doesn't make sense from a labor perspective. It doesn't give incentives for people to follow the programs that the department puts in place and ask them to correct. And that's what it's all about. That's why it's called the Department of Corrections. So when we take away those incentives, then it changes the mindset, it changes the attitude, and it makes the environment that people I represent have to work in, who are the front line, who are actually the ones that are standing in the gap. And it makes their environment that much more volatile. I saw that back in the 90s when I was working in the system. So we are in favor of a second chance and giving a person an incentive to change behavior.
Thank you, Mr. Baylor. For family members, loved ones who have pictures, if you guys can come up and stand here next to us on the podium. I'd like to acknowledge Delegate Ray Cousins, Senator Jennifer Boysko, and I'm now going to introduce Republican Delegate Carrie Coyner, who is also with us today. You will hear from her why both sides of the aisle agree Virginia needs a second look.
Well, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
This is year 3 for me in advocacy. I carried this in its first year, and I'm really hopeful that this is the year that we're able to come together. You know, I'll have a little different perspective than some of the remarks that have been made, just to sort of bring a holistic view. You know, there are folks who are incarcerated today who've been there a very long time, that depending on if they looked different than someone else, got a longer sentence than someone with the same crime. There are folks that, depending on the zip code they were sentenced in, got a much longer sentence than someone in a different zip code. And there are folks that, depending on the quality of the attorney that they had, have a very different sentence than other folks. And I'm not suggesting that every person is in that boat, but I am suggesting that every person deserves to have the opportunity, after time has been served, to have a second look at whether or not the sentence that they're serving should continue in that fashion. So I am a believer in second look legislation. I'm a believer that people can be redeemed and rehabilitated. And I'm a believer that we should do everything we can to have people as free and independent of our government as possible. And this is a big piece of that. So thank you for being here and continuing to support our efforts in this legislation.
Thank you, Delegate Coyner. Next, we will hear from someone who isn't always given a voice in criminal legal reform, someone who was harmed by crime. I introduce Ms. Sheba Williams, whose nephew was murdered. She'll tell us a short version of that story. Ms.
In 2018, I found myself sitting in a funeral home, getting my oldest nephew prepared for his homegoing service. Then came court, working the poll, watching the poll cam footage of his murder, listening to every detail of the 7 shots that would take his life. My oldest nephew, Tay, was what this state calls a true victim. He was fatally shot 7 times and did nothing to contribute to his own demise. Tavon Cook, Hussein Alameen, Renita Williams, Jayshawn Wells, Marcellus Taylor, Yalama Davis, Sharnez, and Naziah Hill. These are a fraction of my loved ones who've lost to gun violence in the past few years. My 3-month-old baby cousin was killed in the same stray bullet that killed her mother on April 27, 2021. Renita and her 15-year-old son, Jayshawn, were killed by her husband on November 17, 2018. lost my oldest nephew, Tayo, on June 16, 2018, and my other nephew, Yaya, less than 2 months later on August 9, 2018. I was angry, and I did not understand why we were losing one family member after another. We're now at more than 20 losses in the past few years. My grief is heavy, my anger is real, my faith is stronger. I have 3 uncles who have been incarcerated since 1991. My parents were arrested when I was 10 years old. My father did 4 times more time for his substance use disorder than the young man who murdered my nephew. Through my work, I have had the honor of meeting hundreds of men, women, and youth who have grown and changed, and I had to take a long, hard look at my stance on forgiveness. Anger consumed my mind and every fabric of my being, and it physically made me sick. Forgiveness is for me, as I still work on my healing journey. I simultaneously have learned about the process individuals take to rehabilitate themselves. I believe wholeheartedly in accountability for those individuals who are housed inside the Department of Corrections, but we know these systems that are in place to serve justice are unbalanced and need reform. Giving individuals who cause harm to my family a second look doesn't leave my voice out of the conversation as the survivor. I don't ever get to forget my babies when I fight for others who deserve an opportunity to contribute to society. I know that people change and grow. I know that there are people who were sentenced to extreme numbers of years that don't align with the crimes they were convicted of. I know from my own wrongful conviction in 2004 that this system sometimes gets it wrong. I believe in change. I believe in growth. I believe in forgiveness. I believe that public safety is about making sure we're not wasting resources on incarcerating our way out of society's problems. I believe in this second look bill because redemption is for everyone.
Next, we'll hear from someone on the other side of the system, Jesse Crossan, who was sentenced to 32 years in prison, twice the maximum of sentencing guidelines. It says he was lucky, but he was blessed enough to get a pardon from the governor. And he'll tell us why the Commonwealth needs second look and not luck. Mr. Crossan.
Good afternoon, everyone, or morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, like she said, the day I went into court for sentencing for crimes that I was guilty of that I deserved to be punished for, my guidelines called for from 10 to 13 years. They were modified to 10 to 16 years, and the judge sentenced me to 138 years with 106 suspended. So an active sentence was double the high point of the guidelines. This judge was later taken up under review by the Judicial Inquiry Review Board and found guilty of violating the canon of ethics, not for my case, but for a number of other cases. But he was still sitting on the bench. And this is one of those cases where there are people who have the very same situation. I can't tell you how many people I saw, both as juveniles, which we've now addressed with juvenile parole, but as young men who were sentenced widely outside the guidelines for crimes that in some cases were minor, in some cases were major. And I was fortunate, I was blessed to get a pardon, conditional pardon from Governor Northam, along with 99 other people. But there's a factor there. There was a political factor, there was a factor of access, and there was a factor of equity that wouldn't be in place if we had second look. Because if we have a transparent process that happens in front of the court that gives everyone a voice rather than something that happens behind closed doors, depending on who can get access to the governor, who can get access to the chief of staff, or who can call in a favor, that's not fair, that's not right. Just as it's unfair to sentence an 18-year-old kid to twice the high point of the guidelines, it's unfair to say that because someone doesn't have money or doesn't have political connections, doesn't have an opportunity, they don't deserve the same consideration as somebody else. And as many people have said, there are people inside who've worked just as hard as I have, who are just as deserving, who have not gotten that same opportunity, and second look affords them that. And that's why I'm supportive of this bill, and I really hope you will consider considering it as well, or supporting it as well. Thank you.
Thank you for pointing out the inequities in the criminal justice system, Jesse. So our last speaker is one of Virginia's newest lawmakers, Delegate Ray Cousins, who has already made a strong commitment to public safety and criminal legal reform. Delegate Cousins will tell us why Second Look is smart policy, and then we'll open it up for questions.
I first just want to thank you all for being here today. For far too long in our Commonwealth, we have over-sentenced people long past when they are likely to commit crimes, with no way to recognize the hard work they've done to rehabilitate themselves. The Second Look legislation creates a permanent, sustainable mechanism in Virginia Code that will recognize the hard work that people do to take accountability, rehabilitate themselves, and give back to their communities. We can all recognize that people change, and I am proud that this bill has strong bipartisan support in the General Assembly. Virginia's extreme approach to sentencing devastates our families and communities. Research has shown repeatedly that long sentences don't make Virginia any safer, but incentivizing rehabilitation does. Knowing that there's an opportunity for a second chance provides a real incentive for people who are incarcerated to take steps to rehabilitate their lives and to return to their families and communities. Once they're home, people who were released from prison through second look laws have proven that they have the potential to make their community safer. We know nationwide the rate of recidivism for those who have been released through second look is 1.6%. Compare it with Virginia's overall recidivism rate of 20.6%. Locking people up and throwing away the key deprives communities of all the good people can do when given a second chance. In addition to being smart for our families, Second Look is smart fiscal policy. Our prison system is already too expensive. It's wasteful to continue to incarcerate people who pose very little risk to others. For every year that a sentence is commuted, $50,000 is returned to the Commonwealth. This is money that can be used to fund our education system, to invest in childcare, and to support our communities. Returning people to the workforce through a second look law is also projected to grow Virginia's labor sector by $27 million over 5 years. Second look legislation would generate millions of dollars that would be injected directly into Virginia's local economies through the labor market. We are all more than our worst mistake, and a second look law will reunite families torn apart by the criminal legal system while improving outcomes for our Commonwealth. Thank you.
All right, thank you for joining us today. I will leave you with something. To whom much is given, much is required. We have many people that are inside prison right now who have done the work and have deserved and have earned a second look, second chance. And so remember that as we leave. If you have questions, please let us know. We have a bunch of people in here who can all answer. And also too, after, there's other people coming in for another presser, so if you'd like to talk with people, you can outside the room as well.
But for now, we have 10 minutes to open it up for questions.
Question for Senator Deeds. Is this a bill that substitutes for reinstating parole? What about parole?
You know,
why not bring back parole?
I think we ought to have a discussion about parole, but I think in the meantime, this legislation makes perfect sense. You know, the bottom line is it'll save Virginia money, it will incentivize people that are in the system to mind the rules, and it'll give people a second chance.
Anyone else? Go
Can I
ahead.
just ask about the role victims playing this? I know in the legislation, a judge would take a victim's impact statement at the time of the crime as well as during the, during the petition. Can you just talk about that and the role that victims will play?
Yeah, I'm happy to take it, Tyler. Sean Winetto with the ACLU of Virginia. So when we were crafting this bill and drafting it over a couple years ago, we worked very hard to make sure that we created a transparent process that not only includes victims, but actually empowers victims of crime. And what this does do, just as far as process is concerned, when somebody that becomes eligible for this petition, they do file it with the court. It goes to the Commonwealth Attorney in that jurisdiction. The Commonwealth Attorney is also provided with records from the person's DOC record, so they're getting a full snapshot of what that person has done while they've been incarcerated. The Commonwealth Attorney is then tasked with notifying the victim or victim survivor in that case. They have to take significant steps to contact that person. If they're unable to reach that person, they have to file a briefing with the court and let them know what steps they did take to reach victims and make sure that they were included in the process. And the court can then determine if it's appropriate for them to move forward without that person, or if the Commonwealth Attorney needs to do more to go to greater efforts to actually include them. The victim of crime or victim survivor would have the opportunity to be in the courtroom, along with the community. Again, it's a transparent process. To be in the courtroom, to go ahead and have their say, to enter a victim impact statement, and to have their say and to tell their story. I think it's also important to talk about how this not just in a retrospective manner, how this helps victims of crime, but also how this affects cases moving forward. And what it does provide an opportunity for is when somebody is going to get a long-term prison sentence, it allows for the person, for the victim and the prosecutor to actually have a say in what somebody might be doing while they're incarcerated. Right now, we actually just hand that process, the person is sentenced, we hand them off to the director of the Department of Corrections, and we hope that they get it right. But one of the big things that victims need as a piece of healing, a precondition for healing for victims of crime, is a sense of re-empowerment. And this actually gives them that opportunity to have a say in what the person does while they're incarcerated. A prosecutor can go to a victim of crime and say, hey, what do you want to see out of this person while they're in prison? Do you want to see them go through substance use disorder treatment? Do you want to see them go through anger management? Do you want to see them get a trade, go to college? What is it that you'd like to see out of that person? And they can actually have some say in that, and they can relay that, and that can actually get to the person who committed harm in the community and maybe even created a lot of trauma. It's an opportunity to actually re-empower victims, which unfortunately our system doesn't make room for right now. And by also just one more little point I'll make on it is when these records are provided, when somebody does file for this petition after they're eligible, and these records are given to, the DOC records are given to the prosecutor, and the victim is going to have an opportunity to see what that person has done while they've been incarcerated. And it's an opportunity for the community, for the prosecutor, and everybody to recognize the fact that people change, and that our laws need to make room for that.
I just want to add, thank you, I just want to add, the authors of this bill, Sheba Williams, myself, Paulitra, Santia, and Sean, you know, some of us are actually also, as Sheba spoke, victims of crimes as well. So we're also victims who believe in second look, and that was part of, you know, why we wrote this bill. We've seen both sides of it, so it's very important that people acknowledge. Sometimes people write bills and they don't have any experience with the things that they're writing on. But Paula and I, as victims of sexual assault and domestic violence, this is very important for us. Any other questions? Yes.
Senator Deeds.
Yes.
And if you'd rather not answer this, I understand. But when this passes through the General Assembly, do you have any feel whether the governor would sign or veto?
Well, you know, and we can't speculate on that right now. It's important that we put a bill on his desk that he's most likely to sign. And we've got to work very hard on that. During this session, we also have to be open to having conversation with the governor and the people in his administration to make sure he signs the bill.
Excellent, thank you.
Just to piggyback on that, have you had discussions yet with the governor's office? Do you have a sense of what he might be interested in signing, maybe?
I've not had conversations with the governor's office, but I would anticipate having those conversations as the process proceeds.
The lady back and then Paul.
Have any Commonwealth's attorneys expressed support for this bill? I know this is the third year in a row gaining more traction.
Sean,
I'm back. So yes, there are several prosecutors in Commonwealth of Virginia that are supportive of this policy. There's about 12 or 13 of them that cover about 40% of the population of the Commonwealth of Virginia that believe that this is good policy.
Paul?
Yeah, so I just wanted to, piggyback on what Sean was just saying about the victim. I'm a person that was system impacted for 23 years. And one of the most prolific courses that I experienced in the Department of Corrections was Victims Impact. Which talk about crimes from A to Z from all victims. My victim name is Julius Jeggedy. And I want you to remember that name more than you just remember mine. Because that's very important. This is the temperament of today's returning citizens. If given the opportunity, if given a second look, this is what it looks like. And there are many of us here today that are doing some amazing work inside of society, trying our best to eradicate some of the social ills that we help create. And we're honored by that. We just need one opportunity to come home and define our relevance. Thank you for letting me share that.
Yes, hello everyone. I have a family member that's also incarcerated, and I just want to know, if y'all have ever been, visited a prison and everything. But on visits, I have seen prisoners, because I don't call